Hey guys, for years I thought that there was 30 distinct styles in table tennis. Now recently I actually changed my thinking on this. Recently I've come to conclude that there's actually 13 distinct styles and 20 specialty considerations. So today in this video, I'm happy to announce that it's going to be 4 parts. Part 1 here is talking about your game. Part 2 is talking about the playing styles. Part 3 is talking about the specialty considerations. And then, of course, part 4 is application. Just because you have the knowledge of it doesn't mean you're actually better. So how do you actually apply all this knowledge in your training? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to bring the board closer to you so you can take a quick look at what we're going to be discussing. Then we'll dive into our content. So 13 distinct playing styles. Steady spinny looper, pressure timing looper, third ball attack finisher, counter-attacking looper, topspin defense like Lauber and Fischer, the wall, this guy that's pushing and blocking, defensive chopper, offensive chopper, short pips smasher, long pips blocker, C. Miller grip with anti, all around near the table, all around far from the table, and then the specialty considerations. Now, I used to always consider all of these to be playing styles, but in actuality, being pen holder, lefty, or wheelchair is not a playing style. That's actually a specialty consideration. So the specialty considerations we're going to be talking about are one-sided pen hold, two-sided pen hold, players that are using recreational rackets or really slow rackets, lefty, wheelchair, very small opponents, tall opponents, somebody who has timing disruption, somebody who favors one side, somebody who changes their style, a really fat guy that doesn't move, somebody who keeps stalling or delaying, how to beat your main rival, how to beat a really loud opponent, how to beat an injured opponent, how to beat somebody who's complaining a lot, somebody who's much lower rated, somebody who's much higher rated, a mystery opponent that you've never seen before and you have no idea how they play. And then we got a special one right at the end. So today here in this video, we're going to be walking through the entire thing, and then make sure you stick around to the very end because that's actually the most important, and that's about how to actually apply it in your daily training. So a number of years ago, I actually wrote a tactics book that I didn't publish. And there's one primary reason I didn't publish it, and that's because when I talk a lot about tactics, people miss one main key point. And the main key point is that winning matches primarily has to do with your strengths, your playing system, your style, being able to force your strongest game on the opponent and have him adjust to you. So I don't want you to look at this list and say like, okay, I'm playing him, so I have to do this. I'm playing him, so I have to do that. And be bogged down so much with, I got to do this and I got to do that you forget about your strengths. You forget about your best serves. You forget about forcing your game on the opponent. I actually talked to Larry Hodges a couple weeks ago about this. I said, you know, Larry, I didn't actually come out with the book because of that. And he mentioned his tactics book. It's a great book. It's called Table Tennis Tactics for Thinkers. And he actually focuses the first half on you developing your strengths. And then the second half is all the styles and specialty considerations. So he agrees with me in the fact that primarily tactics is about implementing your strong points, implementing your best game and forcing it on the opponent. However, some people that you play against play so odd or so different, or they change the timing or they change the distance so much that you have to be good at adjusting. If you're down 2-0 in games and 8-2 in the third before you make an adjustment, sure, a comeback is always possible, but wouldn't it be nice if you could make that adjustment in your training prior to the match, or in the first few points of the match, or at least within the first game? That's what we're going to be working through today, is your different opponents, 13 different opponents, and then the specialty considerations. So let's dive into this. Number 1, a steady, spinny looper. This is somebody who's generating good topspin. Usually they're mid-distance and they focus on control and spin. So how do they win their points? They win by generating a lot of spin, and they win with longer rallies. Okay? So what do you need to be able to do? Well, if you're an attacking player, ideally try to attack first. Most of these people do well against long pushes. So if they do serve short and you're able to push short or play flip, that's usually better against them than long push. Also, keep in mind that they generate a lot of spin. So if you do your normal block or normal counter loop, maybe it's going to go out. So you need to be more aware of the depth difference so that you can time your block or time your counter loop accordingly. It's critically important that you attack first, but the main thing that's critically important is realize that they usually win most of their points with longer rallies. So you can feel less like self-inflicted pressure that you have to finish the point, and you can be a little bit more selective. You see, if you're playing somebody whose third ball or fifth ball attack is so strong, you feel this pressure that you really need to either be able to end the point or to keep it away from their strengths. This guy is winning points with rallies. So if he's winning points with rallies, you can go for it if it's there, but also you can work the point 2, 3, 4, 5 hits before you hit that finishing shot. The second style is somebody who's playing timing pressure. Okay, so oftentimes they're trying to loop first, but most important, when they play the rally, they're playing very early timing. So the first opponent, he was backing up, playing slower spin. The next opponent stays close and plays pressure. So again, for him, it's usually critically important that you attack first, but in the rally, that's the challenge, is because he's able to play very early timing and put pressure on you. So I would recommend the main thing you have to be able to do is hit good locations against him. Maybe from right here, maybe he's really good. Maybe from right here, he's really good. But if you can place the ball well and get him off the table, now you're taking him out of his game. There's 3 distances you can play. Very early, kind of top of the bounce, and late. And this second opponent really likes to play early timing. So whatever you can do to push him off the table, that needs to be one of the main goals. I played an opponent like this one time, and I was attacking first, but not that strong, and he was just playing quick counterattacks right off the bounce and kept pushing me off the table. So what did I do? I pushed deep and wide, I let him open, and then I countered against him, and guess what? He got pushed off the table. So as you can see, maybe there's some different tactics that need to be applied, but your ultimate goal is take him out of his zone from playing early timing and force him off the table. Could be with deep serves, could be with wide angles, but pushing him off the table is critically important. The last thing I need to mention about the second style is that if you just roll the ball up without much quality, he's going to be able to play early timing very, very good. But if you can generate a little bit more spin and especially loop deeper, the amount of downward pressure he's going to be able to add is not quite as much. Let's say, for example, if I'm the guy playing early timing and I'm looking to play pressure over the table, over the table, over the table, and your ball is coming quite deep, either I have to move back a little bit or I have to play a little bit less aggressively, making my style not quite as threatening. So pushing them off the table is great. Also being able to loop deep. And the last thing I need to mention on this second style is if you have the ability of looping different depths, oftentimes this throws the guy off because he's looking to play fast timing. And by changing your own timing, this can throw them off. However, I just have to say we have to look back at that main point. What's that first point? Force your game on the opponent. So if these are things that you've never implemented, I would caution you to try to implement too many of these, especially in the beginning of the match. Style number 3 is third ball finisher. Somebody who's serving, that's called first ball, receive, that's called second ball, and then third ball finisher is somebody who wants to serve and then finish with a strong shot. One explosive loop for the finishing shot. So what do you need to be able to do against them? Well, first thing is identify which side he's hitting the finishing shot with. Could be both sides, or it could be just particular, let's say, for example, the forehand. So if his forehand is strongest, where is his forehand strongest from? A lot of times people will look at a third ball finisher and say, well, he has a really good forehand finishing shot, so I'll play to the backhand. But of course, he's got 20 years experience and he knows that. So he's serving, he's actually waiting from the backhand, okay? So even though his forehand is stronger, you have to ask yourself, is it stronger from the forehand side or is it stronger from the backhand side? So critically important that you attack first, mainly short serves or mainly short receives. If you do play a long push or a flip, make sure it's quality to a good location. Location, tricky location is one of your big keys here. Because if he can predict all right, you're pushing here and he's here, or you're pushing here and he's here, he's going to be able to play the ideal timing and really maximize his timing and speed on the shot. If you trick him, come here and then push here, or come here and then push here, he plays late timing. Now guess what? Now he has to play longer rallies. That's really not his style. The last thing I need to mention about this third ball attack finisher, that guy that hits the really strong shot, is if you can return it and get deeper into the rally, typically you do have the advantage. I would highly recommend, if you're going to push long or flip, that you go wide on the first ball and then try to go to the opposite corner on the second ball. So let's say, for example, he serves and you push or flip to the wide forehand. On the very next shot, if you can hit wide here, that's usually pretty good, or vice versa. Push or flip here, and then the next ball wide there. Occasionally, you push here, he opens, he's diving for that ball, then double up to the same side. If you receive and you block too much to the middle 70 or middle 80% of the table, it's going to be easy for him usually to make his strong shots on. The fourth thing is counter-attacking looper. Now this is kind of an interesting style because it is a looper, but they actually do a lot of long serves, a lot of long pushes, let you attack, and then they play counterattack. So what do you need to do against them? Well, mentally, physically, emotionally, you got to gear up for some long serves and for some long pushes. If he's pushed long, 7 out of the last 7, when you serve short, instead of continuing to get over the table waiting for a short ball, gear up, activate the legs, get ready to hit a strong opening. He wants you to attack, and then he wants to play counterattack. So the quality and the location of where you hit to are critically important. If he pushes to your forehand, and then all of a sudden, you're just open here, and then he pushes to your backhand, and all of a sudden, you just open here, you're playing right into his style. So there may be times that you need to push back. There may be times that you yourself need to serve long to let him attack and then counter against him. But just be aware that he wants you to attack first. He wants you to attack first so he can use your power against you. So no problem attacking first. That's what maybe you normally do. But when you do it, make sure that you hit quality to a good location. And just like we talked about on one of the other styles, when you attack, try to vary the depth. Let's say they push deep to your middle, and you're looping, let's say, to their middle. If they're waiting over the table to play counterattack, really going deep is good. But let's say they push long and they wait back. If you have the ability to spin shorter on the table, that works great. And we're going to be talking about that at the end when we do the application. It's great to have tactics. It's really nice to be the smartest player in the room and really know exactly what you want to do. But if you haven't trained to beat these types of players, and then you get into a tournament and you say, oh, I need to be able to spin shorter. Do you really think you can pull up a YouTube tutorial and learn how to do it at that time? No, it has to be something that you practice. That's why I'm glad you're watching the video right now before you get to the tournament. Not so that you're just smarter, but so that you can actually adjust your training according to your new knowledge. The fifth thing is topspin defense. Topspin defense is like a lobber or a fisher. So lobbing is defined as like sky high, very, very, very high balls, topspin balls. Fishing is defined as more like lower, deeper type of balls. So if you're playing somebody that's lobbing or fishing on the table, just kind of knocking the ball back from the barriers, what do you need to be able to do? Well, the first thing you need to be able to do is relax. Relax. Breathe. Often we're unfortunately programmed that when the ball is low, we're working the point, but when the ball is high, all of a sudden, we have this self-inflicted pressure that we need to go strong. You don't need to. You don't need to hit strong. You can work the point. How in the world does this topspin defensive player win points? He is counting on 11 errors from you every game. As soon as you eliminate your errors, guess what? He's lost his way of winning points. So what do you need to do? You need to work the point longer. You need to be patient. You need to be willing to use drop shots. You need to be willing to use the whole table, to work the point. Keep in mind that when you bring him in, the middle transition point is a great place to hit, but the further back he gets from the table, the wider you should be playing, especially wide to the backhand. Last year, I enjoyed reading one of the articles by Matt Hetherington. He said, for every foot back from the table a player goes, he has a 1.5 foot wider court to cover. So if he's 5 feet back from the table, his court is pretty small. If he goes 15 feet back from the table, then guess what? Then just by going an additional 10 feet back, he's got 15 feet wider to cover. So his court size just went from like 7 feet wide to like 22 feet wide by going back. So the further back that this defensive topspin player gets, the wider angles you need to play. The sixth style, and you see this a lot at the beginner intermediate level. Some people call him the wall. It's a guy who just pushes until you attack, and then he just blocks. A lot of people say that's not a style. It actually is a style, and it is a skill. So don't criticize them like it's not a skill. It's a skill to be able to return the ball onto the table. And a couple years ago, I interviewed one of the best juniors in the US, and I said, do you have any advice for younger players? And he said something that was interesting. I didn't expect him to say this. He said, younger players need to learn to put the ball on the table. You see, a lot of people are so focused on developing this weight transfer, or developing this feeling, or developing this movement, that they lost the skill of adjustability to put the ball on the table. So don't insult them saying a pusher or a blocker is not a style. It actually is a style. And if you don't respect them and bring your full game, you are going to lose to them because they oftentimes don't make many errors. So you need to ask yourself the question, am I better off beating him pushing or am I better off beating him in topspin rallies? If topspin rallies is what you practice at home and you rarely practice your push, you probably won't beat him pushing. He's been doing that style for 28 years and he's pretty competent at pushing. So most likely you're going to be better off playing the style that you've practiced at home, which is probably topspin. So against them, if their push is pretty weak, you could serve like some long serves, or you could serve some no spin serves, get them to give like weaker pushes and go for strong third ball attack. Most of the time, if they're good at pushing and blocking, they know how to read spin, they know how to change their location, and they know how to change like the amount or degree of spin. So if their push is really that tricky, I would actually recommend serving deep topspin and playing open game, playing rally. When I say open game, what do I mean? I mean topspin rallies, especially off the table. So with these guys that are playing pushing and blocking close to the table, usually they're good covering about the middle 80% or 90%. If you can serve wide and play wide and get them off the table, they're not going to be nearly as competent at counter looping and chopping and lobbing and fishing as some other people. So try your best to play them wide. Similar to what I talked about up here earlier, you can breathe a sigh of relief that you don't necessarily have to feel threatened. What is their main threat? Their main threat is keeping the ball on the table and getting mistakes from you, right? So if they're playing defensive, pushing, block, they're not scary. So you don't have to feel this pressure of, it's a tournament and I need to shred them. No. You can relax more and work the point. Do I want you to play their style? No, I want you to play your style. But within your style, you can actually be more selective and go for the strong shot when it's there. Until it's there, be willing to work the point more consistently. Defensive chopper. What in the world is a defensive chopper? It's a chopper, somebody playing backspin that plays off the table and doesn't attack that much. Similar with the wall, the pusher and blocker, he's winning most of his points from your errors. So what do you need to be able to do? You need to be able to eliminate the errors. That starts with, before the match begins, go up to him and shake his hand and say, hi, I'm Samson. What's your name? Can I check out your racket? Now, legally, he actually has to show you his racket. Don't touch his racket with your oily fingers. Actually, take the ball and test to see what type of rubber he has. A lot of choppers have pips on one side, and it's important that you be able to know what type of friction they have, what type of bounce it has, and if it's short, medium, or long pips. This is critically important that you be able to know for the defensive chopper. If he says, nope, Oh, nope, nope, nope. You can't see my racket? Well, tell the tournament referee, and the referee will pry the racket out of his hands and give it to you. It's your right as his opponent. If the match already started, you can't check it then. And as a side note, please don't take the ball and scrub their pips off. I have one sheet of pips here. It's about a $60 sheet, and I was teaching one of my students how to check the pips, and he took the ball and he scrubbed my long pips right off the middle of my rubber. So please don't do that. That won't be the best way to make your opponent play fairly in the match by you cheating right off the bat. Defensive chopper. So what is it that we have to do? Keep the ball in play. What else do we have to do? We have to be able to get a pop-up eventually. So how do we get the ball to pop up? Because a lot of choppers, they chop low, they push low, they push low, they chop low. How can we get a pop-up? By moving him in and out. A lot of people focus a lot on side to side or middle transition point. That's good, but be willing to move the chopper in and out. Maybe one short push here, maybe one deep attack here, maybe one deep attack to the middle, maybe one short push here, followed up by one attack wide to the forehand. Be willing to move in and out, not just with different pushes, but also with different attacks. If he doesn't counterattack at all, and he's got pips on the backhand, most likely, and assumptions are a little bit dangerous, but most likely if he doesn't attack at all, he's going to be weaker in the middle and forehand. So consistently loop to the middle or forehand, or even push to the middle or forehand in this zone, and a lot of times you'll get a pop-up. When you get a pop-up, look for the opportunity to finish. When you hit the finishing shot, where should you hit to? Typically, if he comes close to the table, middle transition point is great. A step off, middle transition point is also good. If he's far from the table, then go for the wider angles. One other thing to consider is when you push, the guy, if he literally doesn't attack at all, don't be afraid to push high, and also don't be afraid to loop high. Looping high against an offensive chopper is maybe a little dangerous, or pushing high could be really, really dangerous. But if he literally doesn't attack at all, that might be something you need to do. When I was a kid, I played against a really, really high level chopper, but he only attacked maybe 1 or 2 times per game. And I knew that going into the match. Now, when I pushed low, guess what he did? He pushed low as well. When I pushed high 1 or 2 times per game, I mean, he just really smashed hard. But the other times, what did he do? He literally just pushed back. So that was my tactic as far as how to get him to pop the ball up, is I intentionally gave high pushes. He gave a high push back, then I went strong for it. So this is for defensive choppers. What about an offensive chopper? If you're playing an offensive chopper, what's one of the main things that you need to be able to do? An offensive chopper is somebody who not only chops, but also attacks. Typically, they're looping with forehand and counter looping with forehand, and then they're chopping with the backhand. So you need to be very, very selective on where you hit to. Let's say, for example, you're over here and the defensive chopper is over there. You know that when you loop to the forehand, then what oftentimes happens? He plays counter loop. When you loop to the backhand, what happens? He chops. So just knowing that, it should help adjust your own position. So you loop to the forehand, what do? You back up, you get ready for the counter loop coming. You loop to the backhand, what do? You move in and you get ready for him to chop. Most offensive choppers are typically doing it like this. They're typically playing that style. Now, the difficulty is if you hit to the wrong location, you hit a weak shot to the wrong location, he can really end it or punish you. Where do most offensive choppers attack well? Let me demonstrate from this side. I'm back here and I'm chopping. If you give me a high push to the forehand, short, it's hard to run in and play over the table like this. If they run in and they have time to move and turn, then they can play. However, short backhand is pretty easy. I'm off the table chopping and it's here, I can just move in and play backhand over the table. So if you're not sure of the spin and you have to play drop shot and you know he might attack, typically very, very short to the forehand works better than short to the backhand with the chopper. If you're going to push long, you have to consider he'll probably do forehand loop, Push long to the forehand, see how he does. Push long to the backhand, see how he does. But most of the time, deep and wide to the backhand works better, okay? So you loop and he chops, and then you feel, oh, I need to push. Why is deep to the backhand better? Because if he comes here and he opens with forehand, his positioning is not as good on the next ball. And that's one thing about tactics that's critically important to remember, is not just what location is good, but what location sets up the sequence in my favor. So you need to be able to attack anywhere against the offensive chopper. But realize when you attack the forehand, he's going to counter loop, most likely. So your weight is back, ready to come forward for the counter loop. When you loop to the backhand, he's chopping. Get your body ready to move forward. Realize that he's going to attack. So where you push to is critically important. Typically very, very short to the forehand or deep to the backhand on your push. Those are your two best locations. And realize that when you push deep to the backhand, he'll probably come in, play pivot, and play forehand loop. But now you need to play tactically good on the next ball. So where do you play the next ball to? Let's say, for example, you push to the backhand, and he comes in and plays forehand loop from there. Here he is. He's back from the table. Chop, chop, chop. And you push here, and he comes in and plays forehand loop. Well, here is the logical location. That would make sense, right? However, sometimes after you push here, he loops and then he backs up here. So what would happen if you go here? Probably chop. If he's neutral, he can cover that one. If he dives here and you can play fast to the middle, sometimes that will catch him because he's hightailing it over here to that location. Understanding these things in theory, it helps. Being able to watch other people like on YouTube, it helps. And being able to play more tournaments really, really, really helps. Like when I was a kid in the late 90s, I was reading a lot of Larry Hodge's Tip of the Week on the USATT website. However, a lot of the tips really didn't make sense until I actually started playing tournaments. I played my first US Nationals when I was 17. I think I played my first US Open when I was 17 or 18. So when I was 17, 18, 19, 20, then all these things started making sense. I understood a lot of these things in theory, but as I started playing more and more and more tournaments, then these things made sense. We're going to dive into the rest of these here in a minute, but I just want to pause for 1 second and kind of give you a little bit of a refresher that applies to everybody. The refresher is, keep in mind that no matter how smart you are, no matter how you know where to hit to, if you don't have the skill of being able to push there, or loop there, or loop there, doesn't do any good. You need to have the skill of being able to hit the ball to where you want it to go. So for a lot of my online students that are using Power Pong table tennis robots, I'll say, I want you to hit this forehand to that location, or I want you to push this backhand to this location. And a lot of times it sounds like, well, Samson's just being nitpicky. He wants this ball here, and this ball here, and this ball here. What is it? It's developing tactics. There's thousands of different tactics, but the one tactic that you need to be able to get is you need to be able to hit from anywhere to anywhere with every shot. If your forehand block only goes cross, your forehand flip only goes cross, and your backhand block always plays passive to the middle of the table, you're not going to be able to play these tactics. So get a Power Pong robot, work on being able to develop all the shots from everywhere to everywhere, play tournaments, and then all these things are going to make a lot more sense. All right, enough with the Power Pong advertisement. Let's dive back into this. Short pips smasher. So somebody is playing short pips, we'll say short pips both sides and playing full power. Some pressure blocks, some punches, and some smashes from both sides. What do they want to do? They want to hit the ball hard past you. So when you're playing against a short pip smasher, what do you really need to be able to do? Well, you need to understand that their shots, like their push or their opening loop, has less spin. This is really important. Less spin compared to hitting the same shot, let's say with sticky inverted rubber. Less spin. They're also counting on you giving a little bit of arc on your ball. A lot of times when you're playing the looper, you're thinking more of the depth. The short pips hitter, they're very, very considerate for the height. So if your serve is high, if your push is high, if your block is high, if your loop is high, from this high vantage point, they have a pretty consistent shot. So a lot of people try to focus on, I got to keep the ball low against him, or I got to keep the ball low against her. That is important, but the timing of your own hit and how much spin you generate are the two main things to keep the ball low. So just wanting to keep the ball low doesn't mean it's going to stay low, but generating enough spin on your own and timing the ball correctly is going to help you keep it low. Say, for example, you serve short. The short pips player pushes to your middle, and then you push a high ball. You could say, Bob, let's keep that ball low. But just saying we're going to keep it low doesn't mean it's going to stay low, right? So what do you need to be able to do? Time the ball correctly so you're pushing on the rise and generate enough of your own spin. If you generate quite a bit of your own spin, let's say, for example, on the push, and you time the ball early, now you have a method of keeping the ball low. So what do you need to do? First, realize that their ball has less spin. Second, realize that they're looking to attack a slightly higher ball. Third thing is to realize that your timing and your spin is critically important. Fourth thing, I haven't mentioned this yet, is to realize that when these short pips players are blocking, the depth is critically important. If they block a little bit passively, the ball will hit and almost double bounce. It'll drop like here. If they add to it, the ball will hit and jump out quite a bit. So as I'm preparing to play a short pips attacking player, I usually work on depth. I'll loop some balls here. I'll ask my training partner to block short, and I'll loop here. I'll ask him to block faster, so I'll loop here. Short pips opponents are more depth sensitive as far as your movement. You need to work more on your in and out movement. If I'm playing, back in the day, I played David Zhuang quite a lot. He would block deep to my backhand, and I would be here, and he would block, let's say, short to the middle. Okay. So if I was just staying back here and the ball falls, I can't take advantage of it. So when he hits short, I need to be able to move in to be able to play to a good location. So more than anything, with this short pips attacking player, during the rally, when he's blocking and you're looping, you need to be more aware of the depth. Final thing I need to mention on this one is when they play smash, usually if you block, the ball goes down. So when they play smash, even though it's not that easy, you really need to loop their smash if possible. And when I say loop, I don't mean like this massive swing, okay? Loop by definition just means extreme topspin. So let's say, for example, the short pips player smashes from there to here. To be able to step back a little bit and generate a little bit of my own spin will make the ball arc. If I lob, it's going to be tough to win, and if I block, oftentimes the ball goes down. So to take a half a step off and practice looping the smash, this is critically important. If you have a power pong robot, you could practice no spin fastballs and just step off the table and generate a little bit of spin. If you don't have a robot and a coach or a training partner can feed you some balls, you can just have them stand over here with a box of balls, use short pips or even normal inverted rubber, and just practice smashing at you. At first, you're going to be like, oh, this is a funny practice. Why am I doing this? But you're going to find the benefit of it. Step back and just practice generating as much spin as you can, looping those balls. Long pips blocker. Now, I have a lot of videos out there about how to play against different types of pips. The one thing that you need to know when you're playing a long pips blocker is what types of pips are they using? Are they using long pips on both sides? Is it long pips on backhand, inverted on the forehand? What are they using? So before the match, make sure you go over there, introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Samson. Can I check out your racket? They have to say yes. Don't touch it with your fingers. Just check the length of the pips and check the friction. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail for how the spin actually works with long pips, but the basic principle is if you don't have much spin, all the balls are coming back with no spin, and usually the ball is kind of dying over the table, okay? So be ready to come closer to the table. If you are generating a lot of topspin, it's going to be pretty heavy backspin coming back. So if you loop with a lot of spin, they block with the long pips, you're going to really have to be able to lift on the next ball, or you can do what I prefer, which is push. Now, when you push to a long pips player, it's critically important that you push deep. If you push, let's say for example, short here, the long pips guy has this angle, short, this angle, and every long variation under the sun. If you push deep and he pushes from back here, you're going to get a much, much, much weaker push. So after you loop, try to relax your arm as much as possible, push deep to the pips on the next ball, and then on this one, you're going to get a light topspin ball, usually floaty, and you can play this next one strong. Another thing to keep in mind when you're playing the long pips opponent is that they play well in front of their body. So if you can go for wide angles, you're going to have a really, really, really strong advantage by playing wider angles. Also, if you have the ability to vary the depth on your own ball, this is really important as well. Most of the pushes should be deep, but if you have the ability to spin a little bit shorter and deeper, this also throws off his timing. As we talked about with some of the other styles, the long pips blocker, especially if he's exclusively defensive and blocker, his main way of winning points is how? From your errors, right? So if you cut down on the errors and you're consistent at looping, consistent at pushing, consistent at looping, consistent at pushing, now guess what? Now you put a lot of pressure on him in order to be able to figure out how can I rally longer than this guy, or how can I push myself outside my comfort zone to actually hit winners? I've coached a number of long pips players, and one of my students, he came over to me one time and he said, "Samson, what do I do?" I said, "What do you mean, what do you do?" He's like, "This guy knows how to play against me." I'm like, "Okay, that means you're not going to get a free win." That means what? It means you're actually going to have to step it up and work for every point. See, a lot of long pips players are used to just collecting a free match or collecting free points because people are confused for how long pips work. If you have the ability to rally longer and really choose and be selective on when you hit the power one, that really causes them to be uncomfortable. And once they're uncomfortable and they start trying to play lower or wider or deeper or more aggressively, then they begin making mistakes. Playing against long pips really has to do with practicing against it a lot. You have a robot, there's some things you can do to simulate it, but you're not going to be able to simulate it unless you have a clear picture of how it actually works. So be willing to watch some of my other YouTube videos on how long pips actually work, and be willing to play those types of people at the table tennis club. When we had the academy open, some people would say, "Hey, I have long pips," almost like it was a bad thing. "I have long pips. Do you mind if I join your training group?" I said, "Hey, because you have long pips, I want you to join the training group." This is a great addition to the table tennis club, is to be able to play against different styles. So when you go to the club, hunt down those weird styles and play against them. A lot of times people say, "Well, it messes up my stroke." No, it forces you to have a more adjustable technique. And also the thing that's actually good is it forces you to adjust your timing. Let's say, for example, if you play against a normal inverted player, bang, 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 you do this all year, and then that long pips guy comes out, guess what? The ball's slower, the ball stops, you have to be able to move in and adjust your timing. If you're good at adjusting your timing to different speeds, now you're a well-rounded player. You see, having good strokes is not just how pretty your stroke looks, it's how adjustable is it to different types of balls and different types of opponents. All right, we are going to now jump into our 11th style, which is similar grip with anti. Now, the reason I'm calling this an actual style is traditionally almost all the players with similar grip play the same style. So I'm calling penhold a specialty consideration because there's so many variations within the penhold style. I'm calling similar grip an actual style. So original similar grip was kind of like this with the thumb up. It kind of developed into this. And now a lot of more advanced similar grip players are holding it like this. But regardless if it's this one or this one or this one, it's all pretty much the same style. They're playing one side of the racket, one side of the racket, one side of the racket, one side of the racket. And typically they have anti on the other side. So when they want, they twiddle, and then we'll give you like an anti-block or an anti-push. Why is this particularly important that you understand it? because most people that play with anti or pips, they have it on one side. So you hit to the backhand. Sorry. You hit to the backhand and you get like a long pips block. You hit to the forehand and you get an inverted loop. With C-Miller grip, they're only playing one side of the racket, So what ends up happening? What ends up happening is they have the choice to twiddle as opposed to you choosing to play the ball here or here. When do C-Miller grip players tend to twiddle from inverted to anti? 2 times. First is for a serve return, and the second is when you give a spinning loop. That's why it's critically important that you be able to serve some deep serves. Anti-returns, especially with C-Miller grip, are most effective on short serves. If you serve deep running serves, especially deep to a good location, and they have anti on the forehand, it's pretty tough to make a quality return. So by serving deep, you put a lot of doubt in their mind on should I be flipping and doing anti as well. The second thing is realize that when you give a spinny loop and you see them twiddle and then they give a block like that, depending on what type of anti it is, if it has some grip on it, it's just going to kind of give you a knuckleball. If it's like frictionless anti, it will be a little bit of backspin. The main thing you have to do is move forward. Okay, so I'm over here and I'm playing against somebody with C-Miller grip with anti, and he's using inverted. I loop, I loop, I loop, I loop, I loop, and then all of a sudden he twiddles and gives an anti-block. What's the first thing I have to do? Move in. I don't care if it's low, I don't care if it's high, doesn't matter. First thing is move in. Once you move in, you can make a good push, you can make a good loop, you've got a lot of options. But as soon as you see the anti, first thing is move in. So I'm just going to give a quick summary and then we're going to talk a little bit more about it. Realize that they have the choice when to play inverted and when to play anti. Realize that they usually play anti on serve return and when you give a spinny loop. What else? Realize that with this grip, there's a lot of limitations. A lot of the limitations are involved covering the wide angle balls. This grip is designed to cover the middle of the table. Once you play wider angles, a lot of things start breaking down. I ask my friends, I say, how wide is the table tennis table? And they say, it's 5 feet. Well, true, it's 5 feet off the end of the table, but guess what? We've got 4.5 feet here, and we've also got 4.5 feet there. Why do you think an Olympic court is like 60 feet long and 40 feet wide? Why do you think it's that big? Because professional players play off the sides. And this is one of the most critically important things that you need to do with a C-Miller grip player is play wide. Serve wide off the side of the table. Push wide off the side of the table and get them off the table. When they're kind of entrenched right here, block, 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 they're great. When you get them off the table and play wider angles, a lot of things start breaking down. Typically, their block breaks down. Typically, it's harder for them to backhand counter loop. So they really count on being able to stay close. So don't be afraid to do deep serves, wide angles, and do whatever it takes to play wide. Now, what if you do serve short and they twiddle and they give you a push with the anti? Well, if you serve backspin and they give you a push with the anti, it's more like no spin, maybe a touch bit of topspin. And the anti is usually quite dead. So a lot of the returns don't go long. A lot of the returns go short. So if I serve short, they return with inverted. I have to be ready for short or for long. If I see an anti-return, typically it's very, very dead over the table. I need to be able to move in. Now, depending on how high or low it is, I'll probably play a flip. I might be a strong flip, it might be a weaker flip, but the main thing when you come in for that ball is to stay relaxed and calm and hit to a good location. A lot of people, when they see the anti, their blood pressure goes up a little bit, they get amped up and they feel like they have to hit like something different. Not really. You serve short backspin, they give an anti-ball short, you move in, stay calm, wait, and flip to a good location, and then be ready for the rally. A lot of people miss this shot because they think, oh, it's something weird. It's not that weird. It's usually quite light spin, quite no spin, and if you stay calm and relaxed, you're going to be able to think a lot better. I don't actually know where I saw this study, but a few years ago, I saw a study from France, and it was evaluating how many things people can think about at the same time in table tennis. So for world-class players that were calm and relaxed and just kind of in their zone, they were able to think of up to 17 things at one time during a point. For the people that their mind was frozen, like, what was that? They were only able to think of 3 things at a time. So the defining thing is when you're playing against anti, try to stay calm. Try to realize that the main reason they use it is to be able to confuse you, take you out of your element. But if you think of the ball as very, very light spin, kind of short over the table, and you have time, you can just move in and calmly hit to a good location. This is the main thing. I've won many matches against anti-players. I've also lost many matches against anti-players. And the time that I was able to stay calm, look to move in, and hit to a good location, and keep trusting my own spin was usually the time that I won. The time that I was really amped up, like, I gotta win this, and I was going for strong shots, and I was just flailing at the ball when they hit anti, that was usually the time that I had too much self-inflicted pressure that I have to finish it. So again, staying calm, hitting good locations, that's the main thing. The last 2 styles. All around near the table. This is somebody who can pretty much do everything, but their main plan is to stay close to the table. They can push, they can flip, they can block, they can smash, they can counter loop. They pretty much do a little bit of everything close to the table. So against them, maybe there's not a very defined strength or a very defined weakness. So what do you have to be able to do? Well, kind of like just like everybody here, you got to play your strong game. Play how you want to play. Don't get so bogged down with, he doesn't have a weak point. No, force your best serves, your best returns, your best locations on him. Final style, all around, far from the table. This guy might be chopping, looping, fishing, counter looping, far from the table. What do you need to be able to do? Adjust your own positioning. Okay? So oftentimes when we play and one player is close, the other player is close, we play a good percentage with backhand and a good percentage with forehand. Let's say 40% backhand, 60% forehand. That's fine, no problem. But if the guy is far from the table, and especially if the ball's hitting deep and jumping, you need to play more forehand. So be willing to back up from the table a little bit. That way you can hold the ball longer and look to play more forehand. Not only are you going to be able to hold the ball longer and control it, but also when you get him out of position and you can hit a threatening shot, it's a lot easier to smash when you've already opened your stance and you're ready for forehand than if you're camped out ready for a backhand. So when they go off the table, yes, we want to play our normal style. Yes, we want to hit our strong shots. And while you're doing that, you want to look to play more forehand. So if he's close, you play your normal zone. As soon as he backs up from the table, especially if he's hitting topspin, like counter loop, lob, fishing, you as well back up just a little bit and look to play more forehand. The other thing that I need to mention about this one, all around style far from the table, is that because you have more time between shots, instead of having, let's say, 0.6 seconds, maybe you have 1.2 seconds between shots. You're going to maybe have the tendency to move slower because, I have more time between shots. Be disciplined with the legs. Be disciplined with the mind. Still try to be able to find the ball as fast as you can. Be patient and then hit. Just because the other guy is maybe playing sloppy, or just because the other guy is moving slow, or just because you have a lot of time between points, doesn't mean that you're allowed to have a mental lapse or you yourself move slower. How do most of these players win points? All around players from far. They win points from your errors. They're usually not blasting the ball past you 11 times per game. So what do you need to do? Look for the opportunity to hit a winner. Look for the opportunity to hit strong. But until that time, be willing to work the point, especially in and out. And as we talked about earlier, when the guy comes closer to the table, you're close and he's close, middle transition point is good. But as he gets back from the table, he's going to be able to cover that middle ball pretty well. You need to look to play wide angles against him. All right, we are going to jump through our 20 specialty considerations and then our best part of the whole video, which is our application at the very, very end. All right, so specialty considerations. Pen holder who's playing one side of the racket, okay? So he's just playing, we'll say, with just forehand on the whole table. Typically, these players serve and they play really well from here. They know that their backhand is weaker. They're aware of that, so oftentimes they're standing quite far over here. The main thing that you need to be able to do is play wide angles, especially this pattern. Push, loop, kind of loop to the wide forehand, and then if they're off the table, then play here. That's the main thing you have to be able to do. Sometimes they're aware of that pattern, so after you play one ball to the wide forehand, guess what? You got to play one more time to the wide forehand. But you got to play wide angles. If you loop first, if you loop in here, a lot of these guys are playing smash or kind of loop. If you loop here, they could play block or they could pivot and go for a strong shot. It's really important that you open to a good location and that you be able to vary the depth of your opening. Especially with penhold blocking, it's quite difficult for them to be able to block from here and here and here unless they're experts at seeing it. So if you open here and they play smash or kind of loop and you feel like the main tactic should be normally opening to the backhand, try to be very selective on where you go. Wide, deep here, deep here, deep here, and then also the short ones. If he's looking to play backhand block and you go short middle and he still plays backhand block, now his positioning is not that good. So that could work. If you loop here and he blocks okay, but then you loop here and he plays smash for a winner, that's probably not that good. So be willing to actually see what's actually happening in the match and then adjust accordingly. On some of my training camps in the past, a player finished a game. Let's say they finished the game and they won 11-7, so 18 points. I would have them get out their paper and pencil and write down as many points as they can remember, every specification of the entire game. On average, people could only write down 2 or 3 points. So if you're playing this guy, this one-sided pen holder, and you don't even remember, okay, I looped here and he played forehand smash, or I looped here and he played backhand block. I kind of rolled the ball up soft here and he still played a backhand. I went strong and he played a backhand, but I played here and he played a smash. If you're not aware of what's going on, it's going to be tough to adjust. But the main principle is that their forehand's strong. Most of the time, their forehand from the backhand side is strong, and they're usually weaker at the wider angles, and they're usually weaker when you get them off the table. So pushing them off the table is critically important. But the main thing that people miss is playing the wide forehand. Even on my serve, let's say I'm on this side and I'm playing against a one-sided pen holder on that side, I'll oftentimes serve short and wide to the forehand. When he returns, I look to play wide on the first ball. If you serve deep to the middle or deep to the backhand and he plays the first ball with his forehand, oftentimes he's going to get another ball with the forehand. So from the very first hit, very first serve, very first return, look to play wide, especially to the wide forehand. It's usually open. Two-sided pen hold. Two-sided pen hold player oftentimes will play steady from here and steady from here. A lot of times their forehand is still better. So if their forehand is still better, obviously you can play to the backhand. Some of them, their forehand, let's say earlier in their career was better, but they've spent so much time on getting their backhand stable that they've spent, let's say 80 or 90% of their time on backhand. So their backhand actually becomes more stable. So what do you have to do at that point? Play middle transition point. Okay, so you need to be able to evaluate what type of two-sided pen holder you're playing. The third is somebody with a recreational racket. Now, for a lot of intermediate players, this is a challenge. They say, Samson, you're not going to believe this. I won the 1400, and I won the under 1500, and I won the under 1600, but in the under 1200, I lost to two guys that are like 850. What in the world just happened? I said, well, tell me about how it happened. No, you don't get it. They were 850. Well, I don't really care that much about a rating. Tell me exactly what happened. Well, you wouldn't believe it. I lost 3-2. Well, that's not telling me what happened. Tell me what happened. Okay, all right, I'll tell you what happened. The one guy had a paddle from Walmart, and the other guy had a paddle from Dick's Sporting Goods, and the ball was just barely going over the net. Okay, now that right there is what actually happened. Especially if you're used to training with other players that have good strokes, playing somebody that has a recreational racket and is just barely knocking the ball over the net this can be a pretty big challenge. So what do you have to be able to do? Hit quality shots. You need to be able to serve deep. You need to be able to hit quality shots with topspin. If they hit the ball short and you hit the ball short and they hit the ball short and you hit the ball short, don't come to me and complain that he kept dinking the ball over the net, because you were doing that as well, which allowed him to do it. So don't be afraid to serve fast, deep topspin. When he hits, don't be afraid to hit stronger topspin back. What will that do? Will that make him play normal and clean? Well, maybe not exactly like your coach plays, or maybe not exactly like your training partner plays, but it's more likely to get a normal, deeper ball. What about a lefty? Now, this is critically important. When you're playing a lefty, you need to be able to adjust your ready position. What is your ready position? Where you're kind of preparing for each ball. Now, when you play a righty, it depends on where you hit to. Okay? I'm not going to dive into this a lot. We could spend a couple hours on this, but I'm going to just touch on it briefly. When you play a righty and you play to the wide backhand, he can hit anywhere on the table. So don't tell me I hit there and he's going to come here. He can hit anywhere on the table. But when you hit to the wide backhand, the ball is coming from that location to here. So you play to the wide backhand and you wait here with a neutral grip. You play to the wide forehand and you wait here. Again, he can hit to any location, but he's hitting from there. Now, in your ready position, let's say, for example, if the righty is serving from there, your ready position is going to be here. Let's say if you push the ball to the middle of the table, maybe your ready position is going to be here against the righty. In general, when you play a lefty, especially if they're serving from there, your ready position is going to have to be here. Even after you serve, your ready position is going to be slightly further over this direction than if you're playing a righty. But the principle as far as where you're hitting to still applies. The lefty serves and you play backhand flip out to the wide forehand, you prepare here. The lefty serves and you play wide push to his backhand over there, you prepare here. Keep in mind, and make sure you hear me correctly on this. I'm not saying that you know where they're hitting to. You know where they're hitting from. Less than 1% of the players in the country understand this concept. We don't know where they're hitting to, we know where they're hitting from. So I play to the wide forehand of a lefty. He can hit here, 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 he can hit here. Okay? So I play there and I move here. If he plays to my forehand, I'm okay. Plays to my middle, I'm okay. Plays to the wide backhand, I'm okay. So keep that in mind. Traditionally, the lefty will serve a lot of serves in here. Why will he serve a lot of backspin, nose spin, side spin in here? Because with the backhand, you're able to change location pretty good. So when he hits here, you're able to change location. With this sharp angle serve coming here, you have limited range of motion with your wrist on your forehand. So a lot of times, you're going to have limited types of returns that you can give. Traditionally, a lot of people see the side spin serve coming, and they push the ball wrongly, kind of right here to the middle backhand zone. The lefty plays with his forehand and is able to go wide to both sides. So you need to evaluate the situation and try to figure out, okay, even if I'm stuck here, where am I going to push to? One of the best lefties that I actually beat one time was one that played a great forehand pivot from there, but really had no backhand loop at all. So I told myself, I said, okay, as long as I can get the ball sharp here, even if it's high, it doesn't matter, because in order to be able to play a forehand from here, as long as the ball is traveling this direction, the guy would literally need to be standing here in order to play it. I can't push low and deep here because I'm going to get hammered. I have to push wide here. So he served kind of different types of backspin, nose spin, and side spin short to my forehand. When I could flip, I flipped anywhere, which was good. When I could push like a good short push, I could push anywhere. But when I wasn't sure, I pushed here off the very, very wide backhand at a sharp angle. And even the pop-up gave him problems because his backhand loop wasn't his specialty. So lefty is not really a style. You still need to be able to evaluate within that style, is his backhand better? Is his forehand better? Is he close to the table looper? Is he an off the table all around player? What style does he play? But there's a few considerations that we talked about. Look to play as many lefties as possible. Only 10% of the American population are left-handed. So if you have 20 people at your table tennis club in Oklahoma, on average, you only have 2 lefties. So if you struggle playing lefties, make sure as soon as you walk in the table tennis club that you point to your lefty and make sure you tell him, I'd really like to play you tonight. Using those opportunities to play against lefties is critically important. Now, don't just categorize the guy as lefty. Also realize, like I said, that he actually does have a playing style. So be willing to take what you learned with lefty and apply it to this to have a complete style. Number 5, specialty consideration number 5 is you're playing against a wheelchair player. Now, one of my students a couple weeks ago, he had a bad loss to a wheelchair player, and he said, Samson, I just couldn't wrap my mind around what to do. I said, what do you mean? He's like, well, I just kept knocking the ball right down the middle of the table, and he just destroyed me. I said, why were you doing that? And he said, well, I thought there was some kind of rule that I couldn't serve wide or something. And I said, here's the rule. If your serve goes wide, it's not his point. If he plays it and the rally continues, it's a rally. If he chooses to let it go and doesn't play it and he calls a let, if it is wide, it's a let. So the able-bodied player doesn't really have to put pressure on himself like he has to serve down the middle. You're allowed to serve to the corners, no problem. What about the short serve? If a wheelchair player, if you serve, let's say I'm a wheelchair player on this side, and if you serve short, and the wheelchair player thinks it's not going to come off the end of the table, it's going to roll back or roll to the side, if he plays it, the rally continues. If he chooses not to play it, and your serve bounces and goes off the end of the table, it's actually your point. So the pressure as far as the rules of it go are not actually on you. They're actually on the wheelchair player to make a judgment call. And is that serve wide or not? Or is that serve short or not? When he's serving and in the rally, none of these rules apply. Play wide. Return his serve wide. You play wide, he plays wide back to you, you play wider back to him. You don't need to feel sorry for them. You don't need to play down the middle of the table. You don't need to feel like playing at the wide angle is somehow picking on them. I've coached a number of wheelchair players over the years, and they know this. They're entering able-body events, and they're aware of the fact that you're going to play wide. So it's actually respect for them to play your best game. You don't need to feel sorry for them and play down the middle of the table. Go ahead, play short, play wide. They need to adjust to this. When I've given lessons for wheelchair players, that's been some of the main themes that we've talked about, is how to cover when people are playing wide, how to understand when they're going to play short or when they're going to play wide, and how to deal with it and how to sequence that in their favor. Next consideration is very, very small players. So very, very short players obviously have a hard time covering the short serve. So go ahead and serve short. They also have a hard time covering the wide ones. Now, especially if you're dealing with kids and you play a wide angle, you most likely will get it. But the next ball is the challenge, right? So play the wide angle, expect the ball to come back, and then play the other wide angle next if possible. Also, when you're playing kids, sometimes you've served a series of very, very, very short serves, and they're halfway jumping on the table before you serve. So in that case, be willing to serve deep like that. Another thing, particularly if you're playing against young kids, is they probably play good and fast topspin rallies because that's what they've been trained. So spin variation and placement variation are critically important. Don't always play like your normal push. Play one push like a little bit lighter and play one push a little bit heavier. Instead of doing your normal forehand push, maybe add side spin on one. Instead of serving your normal traditional serves, break out a couple unconventional serves. These obviously have to be serves that you've served before and that you're comfortable with, but more variety is usually good. What about very tall opponents? Very tall opponents usually cover the wide angles well by reaching, but are weaker in the middle. However, because they've focused a lot on reaching for the wide balls, there's usually a tolerance level, let's say here and here, and if you're able to play outside of their range, then a lot of things break down, okay? So being able to play middle transition point is usually the big key, but being able to also play sometimes outside their range is a good thing as well. Don't look at yourself as disadvantaged, like, oh, this guy's got arms like a condor, I'm never going to beat him. No, there's plenty of tall players that you can beat. So don't look at yourself as like inferior to him. Think of yourself as faster, more nimble, more dexterous than him, and able to hit more shots. What else? Timing disruption. If you're playing somebody that changes the timing a lot, what do you have to be able to do? Hit quality shots. If your shot quality is not very good, it's going to be easy for him to be able to hit variations. One of my friends, he actually has some of the most disruptive timing in the world. And when you're hitting strong shots against him, he's not able to do all the tactical variations. He loves playing one block like this, one block like this, one block like this. And if your own shot is strong enough, then what does he say? Well, I have to react to his shots, so I'm not able to tactically disrupt the timing as much. Okay, before we go to the next style, I'm just going to run upstairs, get a quick drink. You take a break too, write a couple notes. We'll be back in 2 minutes. All right, guys, we are back in action. What about the one-sided player? This could be forehand, this could be backhand, but figuring out their dominant side is really, really important. This is the number one tactic when you're playing against a complete beginner. Let's say somebody who's 100 or 200 or 300 level. Typically, they're going to have one very dominant side and one weaker side. Now, as we talked about earlier, for the one-sided penhold player, he realizes, let's say, for example, that his backhand is weaker or maybe non-existent, so maybe he's waiting over here. Now, if you're playing against a complete recreational player, let's say he's over here on this side, maybe he just stands dead in the center and he's good on this side and he's bad on this side. This sounds like the most obvious tactic ever, but play to this side, play to the bad side. Now, I just have to be able to clarify this. What is the goal? The goal is you need to be able to win the match. It doesn't matter if he knows that you know that he knows that you know how to play against him. You need to be able to win the match. Okay? So let's say you serve deep to the forehand and you loop to the forehand and he misses. What do? Serve deep to the forehand, loop deep to the forehand, he misses. He serves, you push to the forehand, he misses. Please keep going to the forehand, don't go to the backhand. This sounds so obvious, but I actually had a student one time, started off the first game amazingly well, like 7-1, and this guy literally did not have a forehand. And then my student lost 11-9 by playing to the backhand. comes over for advice, and I say, what in the world are you doing? I said, didn't you realize that this side was weak? He's like, yeah, I didn't want to play too much to the weak side because I didn't want him to know that I figured out his weak point. There's nothing more disgusting from your opponent than for you to know his weak point and hit it again and again and again and again. Just win the match. You don't have to use too much, reverse psychology that, well, I think that he thinks that I think that he thinks that I'm going to think that he's going to think this. You don't need to do that. Same principle applies for other things as well. I once played a guy that was 2200 and he really didn't know how to flip at all. So I came here and served short topspin to the forehand, and he pushed a high ball, and then I smashed for a winner. I served short topspin, he pushed a high ball, and I smashed for a winner. It was so discouraging for him that even on his serve, he couldn't concentrate because he knew that he kept giving me high balls because he did not know how to flip, right? So after the match, he comes to me with his head down and he says, that was one of the most humiliating matches of my life. I can't believe I lost like that, right? But think about the opposite. Had I known that that serve was good and I just served, let's say, for example, deep to the backhand, I might have won 11-9, 11-8, 11-9, or maybe I would have lost the match. I don't know. But why take that risk? We know one thing is working, and there's nothing more discouraging for your opponent than for you to know his weak point and continue to hit it again and again and again and again. So with the one-sided player, don't be afraid to just play to that weak side. It's their responsibility to figure it out. Now, let's say, for example, I'm a recreational player. My backhand is great. My forehand is horrible. And you win the first 2 games playing here. What are we going to start off? Are we going to assume that he's going to adjust? No, we're going to keep going here, okay? But maybe by the middle of the 3rd game, he starts coming over here and playing backhand. Then what do? We evaluate the situation. If we're still winning, we can just keep playing here, okay, even though he's getting it back. Or if we start losing, we play some here, then he adjusts, and then go back. See, that's one of the main things about tactics that a lot of people don't realize is just because something tactically was working brilliant before, and now it's working so-so, doesn't necessarily mean that you need to change. Let's say, for example, you win the first game 11-1 using a particular tactic. Now, you win the next game 11-8. He's starting to figure it out. Does that directly mean that you have to go to a different tactic? No. What does it mean? It means you're going to actually have to work for the match, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to jump to something different. You're still winning with it. Now, you start losing, and you lose the 3rd game 11-5. You have to evaluate, was the tactic actually bad? Was the plan actually bad, or was the execution bad? And sometimes the plan was still good. You should still stick with the plan. It's just you missed 4 of your own serves, and you missed 3 high balls, and you hit a couple good shots, and then the game was over, okay? So don't think that necessarily that you need to actually switch to a different plan. If it's a solid plan and you're playing your strong game, the way you practice, your playing system, you're playing that onto the opponent, it might actually be the right plan. Style changing. Now this is interesting. Some people will go out and break out the first game as a flat hitter, go into the second game as a chopper, and then go into the 3rd game as a looper. So if you're winning, I would say don't be that considerate of what they're doing. Just keep focusing on your own thing and keep forcing your game on them. You don't have to be looking back at your coach going, oh my goodness, he's a chopper now. Well, guess what? You won the first game 11-3. You're up 6-0 in the second. Don't overthink it. Just go out and play. But if every time he's changing his style and he's playing something different, then you need to think of the tactical considerations for who you're up against. But be aware that a lot of good players have the ability to make adjustments. So if they're making adjustments and it's still not working against you, you don't need to overthink it. But if they're making adjustments and it's actually working, then you need to be able to reevaluate the situation. The most common tactical question, I absolutely hate this question, but the most common tactical question that I get from people is, Samson, I can't win close games. I'm always up like 9-6 or 10-8 in the 5th game and I lose the match. And I say, okay, tell me about it. And they have absolutely no analysis what happened. They're like, no, you don't get it. I'm always up 10-8. I'm like, shh. sure, yeah, I do get it. You were up 10-8, but can you tell me what happened? And they don't know what happened. I say, okay, let me kind of walk you through it with baby steps. Do you feel that at the end of the match that you play different, or do you feel that they play better or smarter? And some people say, well, I feel that I played the same the whole time. Then the situation is maybe he's adjusting to your tricky serve. Maybe he's adjusting to your locations. And if this is a continual theme that you keep losing these games, maybe you need to be more adjustable at the end of the match. Even though the loop was going here earlier on, he's pivoting and playing counter loop. Maybe you need to be able to play wider. Maybe you used 2 serves in the first game. You haven't used them for the next 2 games, but you know it works. Why not break it out? So if you continually lose close games because you're playing the same way and they're adjusting, you need to be more adjustable. If you continue to lose close games because you're just making unforced errors, then what I would actually suggest is count every point the same. Lily Zhang, she says that she thinks in her mind that every game, no matter what it is, the score is 5-5. It's kind of neutral. Really, your mindset should be the same in practice as match play. Your mindset should be the same at 5-5 as it is at 10-8. For some reason, this hurts performance. Some reason people think that they need to play extra good when it's 10-8. If you're up 10-8, obviously you've done something well, so you need to be able to trust to continue doing what you're doing, as opposed to putting so much importance on those last points. It's just a normal point. If you just learn to think of everything as a normal point, then guess what? You can play normally. And that's really the goal in sports psychology. In sports psychology, you learn that your training, we got to get the level up, and then we hold on to that level during competition. If you have the mindset that you play at 1700 in training, and now you get into tournaments and you want to play at 2000 level, that actually makes you play at 1500. Why? Because you're trying to play better than you do in practice. The worst culprit of this was actually me. Like when I was a kid, when it was a tournament, I wanted to play extra good. I sometimes used a different racket, tournament racket, different shoes, different clothes. I had different food, different sleep pattern because it was a tournament and I wanted to play extra good. And by wanting to play better, that made me play worse. So the same thing goes for you. Regardless if you're starting off the match, regardless of who you're playing, take the approach that I'm trying to play normal, just like I do in practice. What else? The fat guy. This guy is, 250, 300, 350, 400 pounds and just kind of planted right here in the middle of the table. It's quite obvious that you need to play wide angles. Now, if you play wide angles and he literally can't move, what's he going to do? He's going to move closer to be able to cover the angles. The further back he is, the less likely it's going to be. The closer he is, the more he's going to be able to teeter here or teeter here in order to be able to get it. So if he gets really close to the table, you need to be able to play him deep here. This is something obviously you need to practice, but if you can serve or push deep in the last 2 or 3 inches here against really overweight people that can't move, usually that catches them pretty good. So start off the match looking to play wide angles on your push, wide angles on your serve, wide angles on your loop. But if he's covering it and really pinned close to the table, look to play deep here. Pit stop. This guy, every single point, it needs like a little pit stop. Or he needs, to wipe his paddle off or jump up and down or towel his hand off for 30 seconds. And this is an exaggeration, but it literally feels like he's taking 30 to 35 to 40 seconds between every point. If you're playing somebody like that and it's really excessive, yeah, you can get a tournament official. But what I would recommend is you develop a comfort level for doing it. When he's taking a lot of time between points, be comfortable with it. Be okay. Enjoy the fact that you too have time to tactically analyze what's going on. So many people are used to playing fast, that when the other guy is slow, they feel uncomfortable with it. You have to be okay with it, but that starts by developing that in practice. Your main rival. You really want to beat your main rival. I get it. And really wanting to beat him in tournaments, cause you to not beat him. Why? Because you put so much pressure on, I gotta win. It's not I gotta win, it's I gotta perform. Okay? There's 4 possible scenarios in a match. You do the right thing and you play well and you win. You do the right thing and you lose. You don't do the right thing and you win, and you don't do the right thing and you lose. So which 2 are actual wins? These 2, when you did the right thing. You went for the right serves. You went for the right locations. You played how you want to play and you forced your game on him and he was just better. Well, good job. You were just better today. Most people, when they play their rival, they're not focused on their performance. They're not focused on own adjustability. They're not focused on own location. They are focused on, I just want to beat this guy. I hate this guy so much. He said a nasty thing to me, or this or this. And they're so worked up that they can't play their normal level. So just smile, step back, look at him as a normal person and say, this game here is not winning and losing. This game is about performance. I'm coming out and I'm playing my best game. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm not in control if I win or lose because both people are in the equation, right? So both people are in the equation. Maybe he played better. Good job. Good job. You played better. Okay. But at least I went out, I had the right mindset, and I tried to force my game on the opponent by playing the way I've practiced. What about the next one? Playing against a loud opponent. Somebody who's coming there, maybe chewing in your face every single point. Again, why does he do this? Maybe that's his habit. Maybe he's trying to get you worked up. But the more you can have a practice mentality in tournaments, the better. So for my students in the past that would chew a lot during tournaments, I had them do that in practice as well. For students that took more time in tournaments, I asked them to take more time in practice. So you want to be in control of your own mental state as opposed to letting the coach, the official, the opponent dictate your mental state. So even though they're loud and trying to get you off your game, you focus on your own game. As soon as the point finishes, I would recommend not staring at your opponent in the eyes. This eye-to-eye contact, like I'm out to get you, is usually not the healthiest thing for a match. What about an injured opponent? The injured opponent, it's critically important, like absolutely critically important, that you not feel bad for them, but you use the injury against them. So people that have back injuries, typically they can't rotate that much. So a lot of deep pushes to the middle usually are going to be tough on their back. People that have leg injuries, like ankle injuries, they usually can't cover the wide angles. People that have shoulder injuries usually can't raise their hand up. Now, you might think that I'm being mean here, but he chose to play you with the injury, so you need to use that to your advantage. Just like somebody has a bad backhand, you're going to play to their backhand. Exactly in the same way, if they have an injury, you need to play tactically correct. Don't feel bad for them. If you feel bad for them, don't play. But if you're going to go out there and play, you need to do everything that you can to win the match, and that is play according to their injury. The complainer. I hate this, I hate that, this and this and this and this. Smile and just say, I'm okay with it. One of the tournaments, it was a long time ago, it was in California. I was playing against one of my main rivals, and it was windy playing conditions. It was so windy there that the barrier was like flapping in the wind. And I knew that it was going to be tough to play my opponent on that table. So I went to the tournament desk ahead of time and I said, can you change tables to a different table? Can you put us on a different table? And the tournament staff said no. I said, okay. And I had a little heart-to-heart with myself, and before the match even began, I was okay with it. Now, my opponent comes out, and he's like, what in the world? How are we going to play here? The barrier is like flapping in the wind. It is so windy, there's no way on earth that we can play here. And I said, I'm actually okay with it. Because I had already agreed in my heart that I wasn't going to complain about it. I was going to be okay with it. I was going to focus on the match. So throughout the entire match, he's complaining, this place is so windy, I can't play. But I didn't join him in the complaining. I just, I'm okay. And so what? Did that guarantee a win? Absolutely not, but it put me in a better mental state to win than he had. See, that's one of the main things with tactics is realizing that no matter how good or how bad your tactics are, no matter how good or how bad your mental state is, no matter how good or how bad your preparation is, it doesn't guarantee a win. What does it do? It raises your odds. It puts you in the best position to play in tournaments as you've practiced. And that's really the goal for tactics is you want to play your best game. You want to force your strong game on the opponent. Now, in practice, sometimes we wrongly just focus on our own game. I personally believe that even in practice, we should be thinking about developing these tactics to specifically beat the opponents. What about a much, 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 much lower opponent? Play your best game. Your rating is 2,000 and you've entered the under 2,200 event, and some guy that was 800 decided to enter. You do not have a responsibility to dumb your game down and play sloppy and just kind of lose your technique and timing and footwork when you're playing him. Go out, total domination, and just beat him. Now, if you're playing against a 6-year-old at the ping pong club and he came in with his Uncle Billy for the first time, you don't have to take that approach. But we're talking here about tournament performance. So when you're playing a much lower player, the guy's 800 and he entered under 2,200, play your full game. Not only is that going to help you, but it's also going to help you for future matches. If you play sloppy on that match, next thing you know, you're playing sloppy on the next match. The next one is playing much higher opponents. Much higher opponents. This is critically important that you be able to still play your playing system. You think a lot of times, well, maybe I need to go for more risk. Slightly more risk sometimes, but still serve your serves. Push, flip, loop, block, counter loop, just like you've practiced. Now, maybe he's really, really consistent, so you need to go a little bit wider. Or maybe you need to go a little bit stronger. But most of the time when people play high opponents, they either, number one, don't believe they can win, or number two, they overplay it and they go for too much because they don't believe they can rally. I've played around 400 domestic and international tournaments in my life, and I would say somewhere around 70 to 80% of the much lower opponents actually hand me the match. Why? Because I push long to their backhand. Instead of just spinning the ball on the table and rallying with me, they overplay it because I'm a higher rated opponent, so they have to hit higher rated shots. Well, they're not used to doing that, right? So they end up just giving me a free match. So when you're playing against a much, much higher opponent, still stay within your playing system, evaluate how it's going. If you're going to take more risk, take slightly more risk, but you have to believe that you can actually win. There have been many, 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 many huge upsets in table tennis, but it almost always starts with the belief that they can win, not overplaying it, playing within their playing system, and taking what's called measured risks. That if you are going for more risk, you're still selective on when you're going to do it. You're not just closing your eyes and swinging for the barriers. What about this guy? The mystery opponent. The mystery opponent. You don't know what style he is. You've never seen him before. All you see is it says Bob Smith on the playing sheet, and your match is in 2 minutes. Bob Smith comes out of the bathroom, says, all right, you ready to go? Okay, so you're going to go out and play Bob Smith, this mystery opponent you know nothing of. Within the first game, what do you focus on? You focus on doing your skills, playing your playing system and forcing your game upon him. As the match progresses, you're doing great. You won the first game 11-4. You're up 7-0 in the second game. What style does he play? I don't really know, but it doesn't really matter. Why? Because you're doing so well, you just keep going at it, and there's no reason to really over-evaluate it. Now, let's just say the opposite happens. You go out there and you play this mystery guy. You lose the first game 11-3. You really are going to have to evaluate what's actually going on here. How do I categorize this guy and think of what tactics to use? Well, let me just give you two basic categories. Category one is somebody who hits really strong shots and he's just blowing the ball past you. Category two is somebody who keeps the ball on the table and allows you to miss. So if he's category one, that he's hitting really, really, really strong shots, what do you need to do? You need to figure out which strong shots he's hitting and keep it away from those shots. Category 2 is the guy that keeps the ball on the table, maybe steady pushes, maybe steady blocks, maybe steady lobs. Against him, you have to realize that your errors are causing, your mistakes are causing you to lose. So you need to be how to figure out how to be more consistent. Maybe it's relax the mind. Maybe it's work the point longer. Maybe it's generate a little bit more spin. Maybe it's take a step off the table and play more stable. So if you're playing against a mystery opponent and you're winning, you're just forcing your game on him, it doesn't really matter. You don't need to evaluate too much. If you're losing, then what? Then we need to really take our time between points and evaluate how are we actually losing points. What about the last one? Yourself. And I hate to say this, but sometimes you yourself are your own worst enemy. See, winning tournaments a lot of times has to do with coming out there with a neutral mind. The guy might not be that good, but you are so ticked off for losing that last match that it's almost impossible for you to win this match because you weren't able to let it go. Or you're upset because your baby girl or your baby boy or all your kids at home kept you up throughout the night and you only slept 2 hours and you can't concentrate because you're mad about that. Or maybe you get to the tournament and they told you they had air conditioning and there's no air conditioning and it's 95 degrees inside with 100% humidity. You can hardly even hold your racket. You yourself are your own worst enemy because you can't let go of the playing conditions. You can't let go of the fact that your ankle is hurting, or you can't let go of the fact that you only slept 2 hours last night. So sometimes you yourself are your own worst enemy, and this actually causes more errors because you're not able to think neutrally. The more you can think, the more you can act, and the more you can play in tournaments like you've practiced, the better your tournament performance is going to be. Werner Schlager won the World Championships, and they interviewed him right after he won, and they said, "You look pretty calm out there. You look pretty much at home." And he said, "Every time I step up to the table, I'm in that arena playing that match at the final of the World Championships. So when I was there playing, guess what? I just felt like I was just at home. I was just playing just a normal match." And that should be the mindset. Tournament mindset in practice. And then when you actually get to the tournament, just say, "Hey, my job is not to win this match. My job is not to get to 11. My job definitely is not to impress anybody. My main job here is just to go out, play like I've practiced, and force my playing system on the opponent." Are there going to be adjustments based on the style, based on his distance, based on his equipment? Absolutely. And that's what we're talking about this, because you need to be aware of the adjustments that you need to make. But the primary thing with tactics is forcing your game on the opponent. Let's take a 20-second break here, and then we're going to dive into the most important aspect of the video, which is our application. So 20-second break, I'll be right back. All right, Power Pong robot training. How in the world can you work on all these things with robot training? This is critically important. Actually, just so that you get a visual, I think I'm actually going to set up my robot. That way you can get a visual of what to do. So Power Pong offers 3 models. Power Pong Omega, which is the top of the line robot, Power Pong Delta, which is the mid-range, and then Power Pong Alpha Plus, which is the most affordable robot. And all 3 robots, we can simulate game scenarios. They have no spin balls, side spin balls, light backspin, light topspin, heavy topspin, the full range. So basically any opponent we can simulate with the robot. So let's start at the top, and we're just going to briefly work our way through it. So if you're playing against a spinny looper that's consistent, you also have to be consistent yourself. So work on longer rallies. Also work on blocking and counter looping spinnier balls. So turn the spin up to like spin 4 or spin 5 and practice blocking and counter looping spinny balls. If you're playing somebody that's playing like timing pressure looper, it's really important, like I mentioned earlier, to practice spinning some shorter, spinning some deeper, and then most importantly, be able to play wide angles to get them off the table. Also, if they get into their game and they're playing fast, you yourself are going to have to be able to respond fast. So do some faster footwork drills so that you can also keep up with their speed. Third ball finisher. We talked earlier that your location is important. So if you're playing somebody who's hitting one finishing shot, we need to work on all aspects of the game. But one would be have the robot serve short and be ready to push wide. Another thing is, if you do push and the robot pushes back, being able to loop wide, this is important. For those guys that are playing third ball attack finishing, they're usually strong off the middle of the table. So developing the skill to play wider against them is critically important. What about the counterattacking looper? He's pushing long, he's having you open, and then he's playing counterattack. So how would you set up a robot drill for that? Well, what I would recommend is have a deep backspin or half-long backspin, work on your opening loop, and then have the robot fire a quick counter loop so you can counter loop back. That way you get accustomed to the fact of after I make the opening, I'm ready for a strong counter loop, and I'm ready to counter back. What about topspin defense, like lobbing? Now this is one that I would actually recommend. Take the robot off the table, put it on a chair 3 or 4 feet back, and have it give you higher lobs. Move into position and hit. Move into position and hit. But it's really important that you actually practice this. Most people don't practice lobbing and counter looping drills with the robot. If you have a robot at home, I would highly recommend that you practice that. What else? The wall, the pushing, and the blocking. For this one, you need to have solid basics. You need to be consistent on your own. You need to be able to push. You need to be able to consistently loop the backspin. You need to be able to rally with the topspin. And most important, you need to be able to get this guy off the table. His blocks are real solid right off the bounce. So when you practice attacking, primarily look to play off the sides of the table. We've talked about this a lot with tactics, is learning to play wider off the sides. This is not a skill that you can really learn during the match, right? Because a lot of times you're trying to win the match. So Power Pong robot training is ideal for working on that particular skill. The next is defensive chopper. So have the robot give you some heavy backspin balls and some no spin balls. You can sequence it either systematic or random and develop a comfort level of pushing and looping to the desired location. What about an offensive chopper? Well, we talked earlier about the fact that you loop the backspin to the forehand, you're ready for the counter loop. You loop the backspin to the backhand, then you're ready for the chop. So set up some drills according to that pattern. What about the short pip smasher? I mentioned this earlier. Have the robot shoot some like fast no spin balls, step back a couple feet, and just practice with a compact stroke being able to generate spin on those. If you block the fast no spin ball, a lot of times that ball goes down. The long pips blocker. I actually created a YouTube video recently on this one. One of the main things with the long pips blocker is that you be able to adjust the timing. A lot of times the ball hits and just kind of dies. So you need to have some slower drills giving you, let's say, some no spin or some light backspin balls, and you be more adjustable to finding the timing and to be able to generate spin to a designated location. What about the C-Miller grip player with anti? You want to be able to do fast drills, but mix with some slower balls, like slow no spin balls over the table. So set up a drill to give you some fast topspin balls here, play fast from back here, and then when a no spin ball comes, move in and loop, and then get back ready for the fast one. What about the all-around player near the table? You really need all these skills. Same thing for the all-around player far from the table. And Larry Hodges has talked about this many times in many of his articles. Really, if you're going to move up a level, and really, if you want to be able to play tactically good, you got to develop all your skills. Your push has to be better. Flip has to be better. Loop has to be better. Loop on the half long has to be better. Counter loop has to be better. Block has to be better. Smash has to be better. All these skills have to be good, because you need to have all these skills for most of these people. And the more tools that you have, the easier it is to pull this one out or pull this one out or pull this one out. So With your playing system, you need to develop some primary serves that you feel comfortable with and you're comfortable with the return. With your loop, you need to be able to loop against different types of balls and be ready for the rally afterwards. With your movement, you not only have to move side to side, but you have to have the skill of moving in and out. And the more skills that you have, the more adaptable you can be to playing against different opponents. I'm Samson Davina. Thanks a lot for watching this video. If you'd like some online coaching, make sure you check out my website, samsondavina.com. Also, if you're interested in getting a Power Pong robot so that you can practice all of these things here, make sure you check out our brand new website, powerpongrobots.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.